The city had not yet shaken off the golden haze of dawn. The streets gleamed with quiet stillness, and the air held the weight of promises yet to be fulfilled. Inside a sleek black car parked before the gates of a sprawling estate, a man sat with his hands gripping the steering wheel, though the engine had long since cooled. His name was Adrien Veyron. To the newspapers, to the magazines, to the whispering socialites who danced their way across chandeliers and champagne, he was one of the youngest millionaires in the city. But this morning none of that mattered. He stared at his reflection in the windshield. The face looking back at him was perfectly groomed, angular, and hardened by years of relentless ambition. Yet beneath those sharp features something hollow stirred. His chest felt like it was caving inward, as though all the wealth and power surrounding him were but empty shells. Adrien Veyron had it all, or so the world thought. His estate sprawled across acres of landscaped gardens and glittering fountains. His cars, lined in polished silver and black, reflected the sunlight like obedient servants. His name was spoken with reverence in business circles and envied in nightclubs. And yet, with all of this abundance, Adrien was plagued by a single gnawing question. Did anyone truly love him for who he was? For nearly a year, he had been with Cassandra, a woman who embodied beauty in its most dazzling form. Her emerald green eyes could silence rooms, her gowns shimmered with diamonds that caught every stray light, and her laugh was as rehearsed as a melody played to perfection. She was the kind of girlfriend that the world expected him to have. To society they were perfect, he, the young and brilliant millionaire, and she, the glamorous socialite whose smile was as sharp as glass. But deep within Adrien's heart, an unease festered. He did not know if Cassandra's affection was for the man or for the fortune that trailed behind him like a shadow. Did she love his soul, fragile and uncertain, or did she only cling to the sparkle of his wealth? It was a tormenting thought, one that refused to leave him, no matter how many deals he signed, no matter how many parties he hosted. At night, when the grand chandeliers dimmed and the guests retreated, Adrien often found himself pacing before the mirror, asking questions that had no answers. Could anyone strip away the wealth and still see him as worthy? Or would he be discarded the moment the gold slipped from his hands? And so, in an act that was both bold and reckless, Adrien devised a test. He told Cassandra that he had been in a car accident. He told her that he could no longer walk. He brought home a wheelchair, a neck brace, and a mask of fragility. To the world, it would look like the mighty Adrien Veyron had fallen, and he would see, with cruel clarity, whether Cassandra's love was built on loyalty or on the shifting sands of wealth. The decision tormented him, yet he carried it out with the precision of a man desperate for truth. He wheeled himself into his grand marble halls, Cassandra walking at his side, her manicured hand brushing lightly over his arm. At first, she played her role with impeccable grace. She whispered assurances, stroked his hair, and told him that nothing could ever change her feelings. She posed dramatically for photographs, ensuring that her friends and followers saw the tragic image of a devoted girlfriend supporting her wounded millionaire. Sympathy flooded in from all corners of her glittering world. But when the camera stopped flashing and the staged pity was no longer required, cracks began to show. Her smile faltered when no one was watching. Her patience with his needs grew thin, like silk fraying at the edges. Adrien would reach for a glass of water and hear her sigh with irritation. He would ask for her company in the gardens and be told she had a gala, a dinner, an event, always something more important than him. The man who had once been the center of her sparkling orbit now seemed to her nothing more than a burden, a shadow of the wealth and charm she once flaunted. And Adrien watched it all unfold. Every sharp laugh, every roll of her eyes, every excuse that pulled her further away cut him deeper than any wound the accident could have given. His cruel test had become a mirror, reflecting not just Cassandra's heart, but his own fragility. Yet, while Cassandra's mask slipped, another presence lingered in the background, quiet but steady. Her name was Marble. She had been working at the mansion for only a few months, a maid dressed in a crisp purple uniform, her hair tied neatly back, her eyes lowered in respect. To the unseeing world, she was invisible, another servant drifting through the grandeur of Adrien's estate. But to Adrien, in his moments of despair, she became something more. It was Marble who placed the glass of water gently in his hands when Cassandra turned away. It was Marble who pushed his wheelchair through the gardens when Cassandra made excuses. It was Marble who never looked at him with pity nor with admiration for his wealth. Instead, she looked at him as though he was simply human, wounded, vulnerable, yet still worthy of respect. In those quiet moments, Adrien felt something stir within him. Something he had not felt in years. The days turned into weeks and Cassandra's patience vanished altogether. One evening, during a lavish party on the mansion's terrace, Cassandra's cruelty unveiled itself fully. As guests mingled under strings of lights and the air buzzed with music, Cassandra mocked him openly. She laughed loudly, pointing at him as if he were a cruel joke, and the guests, desperate to remain in her good graces, joined in with uneasy chuckles. Adrian sat in silence, his face burning with humiliation, his chest tight with shame. And yet, behind him, Marble stood firm, her hands gripping the handles of his wheelchair with quiet strength. Her silence shielded him more than any words could. Her presence was steady, like an anchor in a storm. And in that moment Adrian knew. Cassandra's love was nothing but an illusion, a shimmering mask shattered by the weight of truth. And Marble, silent, humble and kind, was the one who had seen him for who he truly was. But knowing the truth did not answer the greater question. What was he going to do about it? That night, long after the music of the terrace had faded and the guests had gone, Adrian remained awake in his vast bedroom. The silence of the mansion pressed down on him. It was not the silence of peace but of loneliness, echoing through marble halls built more for spectacle than for comfort. He removed the neck brace, placed it on the polished nightstand, and stared at his reflection in the tall mirror across the room. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to see his own face without disguise. No wheelchair. No brace. Just Adrian Veyron, the man behind the mask. The truth of Cassandra was as clear as the reflection before him. Her love had never been love at all. But the truth about Marble, this gentle maid who had stood behind him like a shadow of compassion, burned in his chest like a flame he could not extinguish. He had not planned for this. His deception was meant to test Cassandra, not to open his heart to another. And yet, in the quiet way Marble moved through his world, she had changed it entirely. She had turned the hollow walls of his mansion into something softer, something alive. She had seen him not as a millionaire, not as a cripple, but as a man, one who bled, one who hurt, one who longed to be understood. What would she think if she knew the truth? The next morning the answer began to unfold. Cassandra arrived with her usual air of superiority, her designer heels striking the marble with each step like a drumbeat of arrogance. She hardly looked at Adrian, offering no greeting beyond a dismissive glance. "I have plans with friends today," she announced, her voice clipped, already half turned toward the door. Adrian inhaled deeply. This was the moment. The mask had to fall. Slowly he rose from the wheelchair. His body, strong and steady, moved with deliberate grace. Cassandra froze, her painted smile twisting into horror, then fury. "What is this?" she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "It's the truth," Adrian replied, his voice low but firm. "I was never paralyzed. I only wanted to see if your love was real." Her eyes widened, then narrowed as though the very foundation of her world had cracked beneath her feet. Rage painted her face in scarlet. "You played me?" she spat. "You humiliated me with this charade?" Adrian shook his head. "No, Cassandra. You did that yourself. I only revealed what was already there." Without another word, Cassandra spun on her heels clicking furiously against the marble as she stormed out of the mansion. Her curses lingered in the air, sharp and hollow, but Adrian felt no desire to call her back. With every step she took away from him, the weight on his chest lightened. But behind him, another pair of eyes had watched everything. Marble stood near the doorway, her hands clutching her apron tightly. Her breath caught as Adrian straightened his posture, the man she had wheeled through the gardens now standing tall. For a long moment she said nothing. Her gaze did not falter. Adrian's heart thundered in his chest as he turned toward her, bracing for anger, for betrayal, for scorn. "I deceived you too," he admitted, his voice raw. "I pretended to be broken because I was terrified of knowing the truth. And now, I fear I have wronged you most of all." Marble's fingers tightened on the fabric of her apron. Her lips parted, then closed again. Adrian could see the conflict in her eyes, the flicker of surprise, the wound of dishonesty and something else. Something deeper. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, almost quiet. "I always knew something wasn't right," she said. Adrian blinked. "You knew?" Marble nodded. "I noticed the strength in your arms, the way your legs steadied themselves when you thought no one was looking. But it wasn't my place to question you. Whatever pain made you hide behind that chair was yours to carry until you were ready to share it." Her words struck him harder than any rebuke could have. She had known. She had seen through him. And still, she had chosen kindness over judgment. "But you don't care that I lied?" Adrian asked, his throat tight. Marble's eyes softened, her gaze holding his with quiet strength. "I care that you were lonely. I care that you were hurting. I care about the man behind the lie, not the mask he wore. For the first time in years, Adrian felt tears sting his eyes. They blurred his reflection in the mirror, but not the woman standing before him. I thought no one could ever love me without my wealth, he confessed, his voice trembling. I thought I had to trick someone into proving it. And now, she asked gently. Now, Adrian whispered, I see that love doesn't need to be proven. It needs to be lived. The silence that followed was not heavy this time. It was alive, humming with the weight of unspoken truths and fragile beginnings. Marble's expression remained unreadable, but her presence was steady, grounding him in a way no fortune ever had. The mansion, once filled with shallow laughter and glittering facades, began to change in the days that followed. The party ceased. The guests who had once clung to Cassandra's glamour stopped arriving. The endless clinking of glasses and hollow applause faded into memory. In their place came something entirely different. The sound of birdsong drifting in from the gardens. The rhythm of footsteps echoing across marble floors that no longer felt empty. And above all, the gentle voice of Marble as she went about her work, her presence weaving a quiet warmth into the house. Adrian found himself seeking her company more and more. At first it was small moments, sharing coffee in the morning, walking together through the rose gardens at dusk. Then it became deeper, long conversations about her childhood, her struggles, her dreams. Dreams she had never spoken aloud because she never believed someone like Adrian would care. But he cared. He listened. He asked. And with every word she shared, he felt the hollow places inside him begin to heal. One evening, as the sun dipped low and bathed the gardens in hues of amber, Adrian turned to Marble as they walked among the roses. Her face was calm, serene, but her eyes carried depths he had never seen before. Marble, he said softly, do you believe people like us, people from such different worlds, can truly find a life together? Marble looked at him for a long time before answering. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of truth. I believe love is not about the world you come from. It is about the world you choose to build together. Adrian felt something break inside him then, not a wound but a chain. The chain of fear, of doubt, of loneliness that had held him prisoner for so long. In that moment he realized he no longer needed Cassandra's approval, nor the applause of high society. He had found something far rarer. Something that no fortune could buy. And it was standing right beside him. The days passed and Adrian began to see his mansion in an entirely new light. Once, its marble floors and crystal chandeliers had felt like monuments to his wealth, symbols of status and power. Now, under Marble's quiet influence, those same halls seemed softer, warmer, almost alive. The silence was no longer suffocating. It carried the fragrance of freshly cut roses, the laughter of sparrows at dawn, and the gentle rhythm of two lives slowly intertwining. Adrian had been raised in a world where emotions were often hidden behind masks, where loyalty was measured in handshakes and alliances, and where love was something purchased with gifts or displayed like a trophy. But with Marble there were no masks. She spoke simply with honesty that stripped away pretense. She never flattered him, never treated him as anything other than human. And it was this very lack of performance that made her presence so extraordinary. One morning, Adrian rose earlier than usual. The sunlight poured into his room, but instead of lingering in the comfort of luxury sheets, he followed the faint sound of clinking dishes from the kitchen. There he found Marble, sleeves rolled up, preparing breakfast for the staff. She moved with practiced grace, her hands steady, her face serene. He stood in the doorway for a long while, simply watching. It struck him then how profoundly different she was from Cassandra. Cassandra had reveled in the attention of audiences, always ensuring her every move was witnessed, applauded, admired. But Marble performed her quiet acts of care in hidden corners, with no expectation of recognition. "You're up early," she said, finally noticing him. "I could say the same for you," he replied, leaning against the frame. Marble smiled faintly, returning her attention to the pan before her. The house runs smoother when the day starts before the sun fully wakes. Adrian stepped forward, picking up a stray plate from the counter. "Let me help." She raised her eyebrows. Adrian Veyron helping in the kitchen? That might cause a scandal in high society. He chuckled, placing the plate gently beside hers. Let them talk. Perhaps it's time they saw a different Adrian Veyron. For a moment, her eyes lingered on his face and then she turned back to her work. But in her silence, Adrian sensed something, respect, maybe even affection, that warmed him more than all the praise he had ever received. As the weeks rolled into months, their bond deepened. They shared meals not in the grand dining hall but at the small wooden table near the garden, where the air smelled of jasmine and the walls carried no echoes of judgment. Adrian began to learn about Marble's past, the small village where she was raised, the hardships her family endured, the sacrifices that had shaped her quiet strength. She spoke of her dreams too, though reluctantly, as if afraid to let them breathe in the open air. "I used to dream of studying," she admitted one evening, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "Not to escape who I am but to learn, to grow. Life had other plans, but the dream never left me." Adrian listened, every word carving itself into his heart. "And if you had the chance now?" She hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Perhaps dreams are not meant for people like me." Adrian reached across the table, his hand brushing hers gently. "On the contrary. Dreams are the only things worth holding on to. And if you still want yours, I will do everything I can to help you reach it." Her eyes widened at his words, but instead of replying, she lowered her gaze, her fingers curling slightly beneath his touch. It was not acceptance, not refusal, but something between, a fragile moment of possibility that made Adrian's chest ache with hope. The contrast between the two women in Adrian's life became clearer with each passing day. Cassandra's memory faded quickly, her shallow laughter now seeming like the echo of a world Adrian no longer belonged to. In her place stood Marble, humble, strong, and unwavering. She never mocked his weaknesses, never exploited his fears. She simply stood beside him, steady and constant, as though her very presence was enough to heal the cracks in his soul. But Adrian knew the world outside their quiet sanctuary was not so forgiving. Whispers began to circulate in high society. Some said Adrian had gone mad, surrounding himself with servants instead of peers. Others claimed Cassandra had been wronged and that Adrian's behavior had scandalized their circles. Invitations dwindled. Former friends avoided his calls. The glittering world he had once ruled turned its back on him. One evening, as he and Marble walked through the rose garden, Adrian finally spoke what had been weighing on him. "Do you realize what it would mean if the world knew of us?" Marble glanced at him, her brow furrowing. "Us?" Adrian stopped, facing her fully. "Yes, us. You and me. They would never understand, Marble. To them, love is supposed to be written in diamonds and signed with gold. They would never accept that I, Adrian Veyron, could fall for someone like you." Her expression was unreadable, but her voice was steady when she answered. "Then perhaps you must decide which world you truly want to live in, the one they made for you or the one you are building with me." Her words pierced through him, stripping away the last remnants of doubt. He realized then that love was not about acceptance from the world. It was about acceptance from the heart. That night, Adrian stood once again before the mirror, as he had so many times before. But this time the reflection staring back at him was not hollow. His eyes no longer carried the emptiness of doubt but the clarity of purpose. He thought of Cassandra, her cruelty, her shallow love, her hunger for status. And then he thought of Marble, her gentleness, her dignity, her unwavering kindness. The contrast was so stark it felt as though he was looking at two different worlds. When he turned from the mirror, Marble was there, standing in the doorway, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the lamp. She looked at him with quiet curiosity, as though she sensed the storm inside him. Adrian stepped forward, his voice low but resolute. "Marble, I need you to know something. You are not invisible to me. You never were. You are the reason this house feels alive again. You are the reason I no longer fear what I see in the mirror. And if the world does not understand that, let it be. Because I would rather live one day in your truth than a lifetime in their lies." Marble's eyes glistened, though she did not speak. Instead, she stepped closer, her hand brushing against his as gently as the wings of a butterfly. It was not a declaration, not a promise, but a beginning. And for Adrian that was enough. The mansion no longer echoed with the clinking of crystal glasses or the shallow laughter of guests. Instead, it carried the soft hum of life lived quietly, sincerely. Adrian no longer sought out society's approval. He no longer needed to host extravagant dinners or surround himself with hollow company. His world had shifted, narrowed, and in that narrowing he discovered something vast: love. It was in the small things that he and Marble found their bond growing. She brewed his morning coffee, always just the way he liked it, and he, in turn, carried trays when she struggled under their weight, unwilling to let her bear burdens alone. They walked together in the gardens, sometimes speaking of dreams, sometimes in silence, letting the quiet say more than words ever could. One evening, as dusk draped the sky in shades of lavender, Adrian paused by the fountain where water spilled over smooth stone. He turned to Marble, his expression earnest. "You changed everything," he said softly. Marble looked at him, her face calm but her eyes deep. "No, Adrian. You changed when you chose truth over illusion." He smiled, though there was a tremor in it. Perhaps. But you gave me the courage to do so. Without you, I would still be a prisoner to fear, to doubt. You gave me more than kindness. You gave me a reason to believe in love again. For a long moment she said nothing. Then with quiet grace she reached for his hand. Her fingers were warm, steady, grounding him in a way no riches ever had. Months slipped by and the seasons turned. Spring blossomed into summer, and with it came a transformation not only in Adrian's home but in his heart. He no longer saw himself as a hollow reflection, nor as a man defined by wealth. He was simply Adrian, a man who had once been lost but who had now been found, not by society, but by the heart of a woman who had never needed diamonds to shine. One morning, Adrian stood before his mirror once more. But this time the reflection that gazed back at him was alive, vibrant, whole. The hollowness was gone. His eyes carried purpose, his heart carried peace. When he turned away, Marble was there as she always seemed to be, not with fanfare, not with spectacle, but with presence. She smiled at him, soft but radiant, and in that smile lay everything he had been searching for. They did not need grand declarations or extravagant promises. What they had was stronger than spectacle. It was trust. It was honesty. It was love, pure and unshakable. And Adrian knew, as he took Marble's hand in his, that he had finally found the truth he had been searching for all along. True love had been waiting, not in the brilliance of wealth, not in the glitter of parties, but in the quiet heart of a maid who had seen him, believed in him, and loved him for who he truly was.